Could vaccine passports be coming to the D.C. area and a city near you? With me now to talk about this and more is U.S. Representative James Comer. He's the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, and he serves the 1st Congressional District in the great state of Kentucky. Congressman Comer, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be back.
Well, tell me first, what's your reaction to these cities implementing or taking steps toward vaccine passports?
Well, I'm opposed to vaccine passports in general. But when you talk about Washington, D.C., there are lots of unintended consequences that the local leaders don't think about or don't care about. First of all is that Washington, D.C. is our nation's capital. That would, are they going to require any lawful citizen in America who wants to come petition the government to have a vaccine passport? That's a serious question that needs to be answered. And if they did, then that's violating the Constitution, because the great thing about the United States of America is any citizen has the right to go and meet with their representative or senator and petition their government. So this is another burdensome regulation that's unnecessary. It's another left-wing Christmas wish list item that the liberals in Washington, the socialists in Washington are trying to do. I don't think it's constitutional. I don't think it makes any sense. The science doesn't back up a lot of what they're trying to do, and I just am totally opposed to it, because I think that in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, it needs to be open to every law-abiding citizen.
When Mayor de Blasio in New York City announced their passport last week, he indicated that he thought many cities would follow. And so far, it doesn't look like it's many. It's only a handful. Some of the usual suspects, I suppose. We've seen Los Angeles take steps and San Francisco move in that direction. Are you encouraged that so few cities have moved this direction?
I am encouraged. And as you said, it's the usual suspects that, no matter how liberal the idea, the same cities always embrace those liberal left-wing ideas with open arms. What we've got to look at in America, if you're truly concerned about the low number of people that have been vaccinated for COVID, when you have liberal leaders trying to mandate vaccinations, and you have liberal leaders trying to require regional vaccine passports and require wearing masks outdoors, and ridiculous regulations that aren't backed up by science, then you're only going to create more skepticism among the public who are truly torn between whether or not to be vaccinated, and especially whether or not to have their children vaccinated. So I think the liberals, as they always do, are creating more harm than good with our nation's health.
Now, you mentioned the civil liberties concerns associated with vaccine passports. In your mind, would there ever be a situation where a pandemic was so severe that it would justify this sort of government oversight or intervention? Or in all cases, regardless of how severe the pandemic is or is not perceived to be, is it always inappropriate?
I've thought about that a lot. And I remember when President Trump first did the travel ban, a lot of liberals had a problem with that. Now, now that Trump's not in office, they would support things like that. If the pandemic is so severe and the death rate is an excessive death rate, and it's not just affecting certain segments of the population, mainly those people with pre-existing conditions, then I think that the government would have to consider drastic measures. But the death rate, the hospitalization rate, the numbers are pretty clear as to what demographic that COVID-19 is affecting. For example, you've got in Kentucky right now, our liberal Democrat governor has mandated that every child wear a mask in school, even though Kentucky's a state that believes in local control, especially with respect to education. The science and the data on children that have been adversely affected by COVID-19 is a decimal percentage of 0.1%. So you've got a situation where these liberals continue to overreact, and I think that if you look at COVID-19, it's very serious. I'm not undermining the severity of COVID-19 one bit, but I think we've learned now, whereas we didn't know a lot about it in the beginning, I think we've learned the demographic of the population that needs to be most concerned. Obviously, when you're talking about a mask, certainly you should have masks in hospitals and in nursing homes and things like that. But these vaccine passports, that's an overreach. There's no data or science that suggests that this is necessary or even close to being necessary. I think that it's an individual's decision. I think that there's still some. I've been vaccinated. I'm very transparent with that. But there's a lot of people that call me and ask, well, what should I do? My wife's pregnant, or I have a young child, and honestly, we don't have enough data. I haven't read enough data to be able to give someone what I would consider credible advice on it. So this is a decision that people have to make in consultation with their doctors, but certainly having liberal government leaders that want gun control, that want abortion on demand, that want boys to be able to play girl sports in this transgender movement, them making decisions that affect law-abiding citizens is not something that's going to help the cause, in my opinion.
I will say I agree with you that I have difficulty taking medical advice from people who have difficulty distinguishing between men and women. And that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in right now. But I want another layer of this is the requirements that the Biden administration has put on federal employees, as well as the military now. And on Tuesday's broadcast of Fox News Channel's Your World, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby, he said that soldiers who have religious objections to their vaccine mandate for service members can go through a process and get religious exemptions. Here's what he said about that.
Well, a member of the military who wants to claim a religious exemption can certainly do that. There's a process for that. It's not a blanket check. I mean, you've got to go through a process to get that approved. Troops who have pre-existing medical conditions or on the advice of their physician might not have to take the vaccine. But if you're just objecting because you're objecting, once it's become mandatory, that's a lawful order. And our expectation is that you're going to obey that order.
His position with respect to members of the military seems to be more strict than his position is for those coming into the country illegally at the southern border. Do you think that's a fair assessment, and do you think that's a problem?
That's a fair assessment, and it's a huge problem. I mean, what I've seen out of the Biden administration in the first 8 months in office, and it's exactly what I see out of the overwhelming majority of the left-wing members of Congress in the Democrat Party. They support everyone's civil liberties and everyone's liberties except those people of faith. And it's just really discouraging to see the administration want to mandate to our military, to our school children, to every law-abiding citizen, healthcare workers, and everyone else that you have to be vaccinated. But, it's okay if you're an illegal and you come across the border and you haven't been vaccinated for anything, much less COVID-19, then you can come across and everything will be fine. In fact, in our budget reconciliation bill, we're going to go ahead and give you amnesty here. So the priorities of the Biden administration are so warped. It's just really frustrating to be a conservative member of Congress right now because, in the House of Representatives, we're doing everything we can to try to fight for people's religious liberties. We're trying to fight for the taxpayers. We're trying to fight for common sense. And it's just we're coming up 5 votes short on everything, it seems like.
Well, I think most Americans would agree that treating our service members more skeptically than people who are not citizens who have just broken into the country is on its face a problem. But you have joined Republican members of the House Oversight Committee demanding a field hearing in New Mexico to talk about what's going on at the border. We have about just 1 minute left, but what are you trying to accomplish there?
Well, unlike Kamala Harris, the Republican members of the Oversight Committee, we've all been to New Mexico. We've met with law enforcement. We've met with local landowners. And the border situation is unbelievably bad. It's much worse than anyone would ever imagine. The administration's doing nothing to stop the illegal flow of aliens, and we want to have a committee hearing there to highlight exactly what's going on, let local people, let their voices be heard, and let America see what's really going on at the southern border.
Congressman James Comer, we really appreciate you doing it, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.